Good afternoon and welcome to the November 6, 2013 meeting of the Murfreesboro Planning Commission. We have a quorum present, so I'll call the meeting to order. Before we get on with our agenda today, I understand we have a birthday celebration in the room tonight. Mrs. Margaret Ann Green celebrating, was it 25?
Yep.
Something like that tonight. So,
I don't understand the
happy birthday. Happy birthday, Mrs. Green. We have 5 public hearings on our agenda tonight, the first of which is a zoning application for approximately 4.2 acres to be rezoned from commercial highway to RM16 along with Manson Pike. Along Manson Pike. Charlie Waite, on behalf of Puckett Creek Station LLP, is the applicant. Ms. Green?
Thank you. Our first public hearing this evening is to consider rezoning property that's currently zoned CH or Highway Commercial District from its CH district to RM16, Residential Multifamily District. This property is located south of Manson Pike and is adjacent to the recently developed Integra Creek Apartments. The properties to the north, south, and east are zoned CH and are undeveloped. As I mentioned, the property to the west or northwest is zoned RM16 and is developed with the Integra Creek Apartment campus. The entire property is located within our Gateway Design Overlay District, GDO1, and any development on it requires both initial and final design review approval by the Planning Commission. It's expected that in the future there will be a commercial development located between the subject area and the property to the east. Under the RM16 zoning classification, approximately 67 dwelling units could be developed on the 4.2 acre portion of property that's being requested to be rezoned. However, if this property is combined with the existing Integra Creek development that it's adjacent to, which I believe is the plan, it is possible that there could be a slightly higher number of units in this area because the Integra Creek property currently does not meet the maximum number of dwelling units permitted on that property. So if it were combined, the total acreage would be considered, and it could be that the Integra Creek, which now has 264 dwelling units, that the currently existing Integra Creek and the proposed RM16 property combined could have 330 dwelling units. So that would include the existing 264 dwelling units that are currently located as part of this development. We did contact the Rutherford County Board of Education to inquire as to how many students they have attending the schools from the existing Integra Creek development. And according to the Rutherford County Board of Education, there are currently 3 high school students, 9 middle school students, and 14 elementary students for a total of 26 children residing in the Integra Creek apartment complex. And that, if you were looking at a ratio, amounts to approximately 1 student for every 10 dwelling units. Based on these numbers, it's been estimated by the planning staff that if the property is rezoned as requested, there would be between 6 and 8 additional school students residing within the complex on this property, the subject property. The Planning Commission should conduct a public hearing to consider zoning this portion of property, which is approximately 4.2 acres, from its current CH to RM16 district. It will remain within the Gateway Design Overlay District. Mr. Charlie Waite and a representative from the Integra Creek Apartments are both here this evening. If you have any questions from them, they'll be glad to answer them. Otherwise, you should conduct your public hearing. If you have any questions, either myself or Mr. Adelot will be glad to answer them.
Okay. Does the representative of the developer wish to say anything before we open the public hearing?
No, he's just available for questions.
Okay. Any questions of Mr. Adelot or Mrs. Green? Okay, before I open the public hearing, in case you've never been to one of the public hearings here, we'll open the public hearing. We'll ask you to come forward. Anybody that would like to speak, come to the microphone. Please clearly state your name and give your address if you would. Make all your questions and comments to the Planning Commission. If you do have questions, the staff will try to make a note of your questions, and at the conclusion of the public hearing, they'll do their best to answer them for you. Keep your comments or questions to no more than 3 minutes so everybody will have an opportunity to come up. All that being said, I'll open the public hearing at this time. Ask anybody to come forward that would like to speak on this proposal. Nobody coming forward? Okay, if that's the case, I'll close the public hearing. Are there any questions from members of the Planning Commission? If not, we're ready for a motion.
Chairman, I have no questions on this for further staff.
Second. Motion's made and seconded. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Item B on tonight's agenda is annexation petition for approximately 306 acres along Manchester Highway. Mrs. Betsy Taylor, on behalf of the Maples Family, LLC, is applicant. Ms. Green.
Thank you. Our next public hearing is to consider a request for annexation made by the property shaded in the orange color on the map that is before you on the screen. This property is located along Manchester Pike and is 306 acres. Ms. Betsy Taylor is representing the Maples family. The Maples family have submitted a petition to annex their property to the city of Murfreesboro. It's located beyond the intersection with Joe V. Jackson Parkway and is adjacent to the Whitworth Buckhannon Middle School. And that's the property that's identified in yellow with the little school symbol to the north. The property included in the petition area includes 2 tracts of land owned by the applicant and also includes approximately 2,690 linear feet of Manchester Highway right-of-way. And that right-of-way does extend in front of the Whitworth Buckhannon School, as you can see from the map before you. The owners have petitioned annexation in order for the property to benefit from city-provided services such as sanitary sewer, fire protection, solid waste, and planning services. It's their intention to develop the property with a primarily single-family residences, detached single-family residences, with some commercial along the front to support the residential development to the rear. A zoning plan has been submitted for consideration and will be the subject of the next public hearing, not this public hearing. This public hearing is to consider the annexation of the property requested by the Maples family. Included with the annexation is a feasibility study and plan of services which outlines the services that will be available to the property. It seems that city services will be available to the property upon the annexation becoming effective. The subject property is located within the city's urban growth boundary. It's also contiguous with current city limits along its northwestern property line. No other parcels must be annexed in order to effect this annexation, so there's no additional study area. The property is primarily undeveloped, and the owners have indicated they intend to pursue development of their property. The Planning Commission will need to conduct a public hearing prior to making your recommendation regarding the annexation of these properties. If you have any questions, Mr. Adelauder or myself will be glad to answer them either before or after the public hearing.
Okay. Any questions of Mr. Adelauder or Ms. Green? Ms. Maples, do you have anything to say before we open the public hearing, or your representative? Okay. We'll open the public hearing at this time and ask anybody to come forward that would like to speak.
Good evening, gentlemen. My name is Stan Whiteway. I'm the president of the Homeowners Association for Triple Crown Farms, which is just south and east of the proposed annexation area. I'd like to say, first of all, that we're very pleased in one respect that this area is going to be annexed by you all. But I have before me a petition, so to speak, from the residents of Triple Crown Farms that is not objecting to any of the annexation or the zoning, but we would like some sort of assurance that there will not be any cut-through from the new area into Triple Crown Farms. In other words, we would like to remain semi-independent or self-sustaining, if you will. And as I said, I've got a petition here signed by many of the residents of the area that I'd like to present to you if you wish to accept it.
Yes, sir. I'd be glad to. If you'll give it to the staff.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Mr. White. Would anybody else like to speak? Anybody at all? Yes, sir.
I will second that. My name's Alan Fair. I'm on 4224 Thoroughbred Lane, Triple Crown Farms. So I've signed this. So thank you very much for your time.
Yes, sir. Thank you for coming in. Anybody else? If nobody's coming forward, I'm going to close the public hearing. Mr. Adelott, would you like to comment?
Yes, sir. Tonight our public hearing is about annexation of the property, and then the next public hearing will be about zoning. Really, we're not making any decisions about road layout or how it will interconnect. At some point after the time that the property is annexed, we will be looking at a master plan for the property and a subdivision plan, and it will identify the street network within the property and how it may interconnect with adjacent properties. That will be at a future time when plans have been prepared. I will tell you that it's my belief that when the county stubbed a street to this property, they made a good decision so that in the future, as development occurs, it will allow for interconnectivity. The subdivision has only one way into it right now, and this will allow another way. It will not promote cut-through traffic, but it would probably be good for the eventual the provision of services. We deal with these kind of issues quite a bit. If we do see a connection here, when we do look at a subdivision plan, we would like to see it made in such a way that it does not create a collector street or a through traffic, but it does allow the connection so that if there's another way in and out of the draw subdivision. It's not, so we're not making that decision tonight. We are listening to you. We will keep your petition in our file. We will review it again when we look at a subdivision plan.
Thank you, sir.
Your petition is on record, sir, and we've noted your comments, so thank you very much for coming up.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions for? Yes, sir, Mr. Young.
Is there only one or two houses on this property at this time?
On this land development tract, I believe there are 2 or 3 houses. One of them is the old Clark Maples residence, and then a couple of them are like tenant houses that are on the property.
I guess the question I was asking is there going to be any problem providing services for these two houses?
Some of them, there may be an issue of fire protection until fire hydrants are installed. Some of these structures will be removed as development occurs. The old Clark Maples house, Mr. Maples' old house, it's the intention of the development, the family, to try to incorporate it as an amenity area. But the other houses will be demolished as part of the development of the property unless by just some fortune they can be preserved. But they really don't have the quality they're looking for in this development.
Thank you, Mr. Young. Any other questions? If not, we're ready for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I make the motion to approve subject to staff comment.
Second motion.
Motion is made on the annexation and seconded. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to item C, it's a zoning application for approximately 8.5 acres to be zoned commercial highway, approximately 26.84 acres to be zoned RS8, approximately 80 acres to be zoned RS10, approximately 120.35 acres to be zoned RS12, and approximately 64.82 acres to be zoned RS15 simultaneous with annexation along the Manchester Highway. Mrs. Betsy Maples Taylor, on behalf of Maples Family LLC, is the applicant. Ms. Green.
Thank you. This next public hearing is being made simultaneous with the previous request. This next public hearing is to consider changing the zone of the property for which you just recommended annexation to several different zoning districts. The property, of course, was the subject of the annexation petition, which you just considered, and it's located just beyond the intersection of Joe B. Jackson Parkway with Manchester Highway. It is located adjacent to the Whitworth Buckhannon Middle School. It's the same property that we just considered, and the application is to consider changing the zone from what it is in the county to the following, and that would be approximately 8.5 acres along the frontage of Manchester Highway, which is shown in the blue color along the frontage of Manchester Highway, to be zoned CH, and then to zone approximately 26.84 acres to RS8, and the RS8 property is shown in the red color on the map. RS8 would allow single-family detached dwellings with a minimum lot size of 8,000 square feet, and it's staff's recommendation that there could be a potentially 80 RS8 lots. Another part of this request is to zone approximately 8 acres to RS10, and the RS10 area is the blue area that's located to the rear of the property. And RS10 allows single-family detached dwellings with a minimum lot size of 10,000 square feet. And based on our estimation that there could be a potentially 266 RS10 lots. Another part of this request is to zone 120.35 acres to RS12, and that property is identified in green on the map before you. And the RS12 zone would allow single-family detached lots with a minimum lot size of 12,000 square feet, and it's our estimate that there could be possibly 330 RS12 lots. Another part of the request is to zone approximately 64.82 acres to RS-15, and the area proposed to be RS-15 is yellow on the map that's before you. An RS-15 district allows single-family detached dwellings with a minimum lot size of 15,000 square feet. And it's our estimate that there could be possibly 144 RS-15 lots. The owner desires to develop a residential subdivision with many similarities to the Berkshire subdivision located along Blackman Road. Under this zoning program, it appears that a maximum of approximately 820 single-family detached dwelling units could potentially be developed on the property, although it's likely that that number will be considerably less because they will have to make provisions for the city's stormwater management, and also the developer will likely choose to add some ambiance or open space or amenities to the property, which would decrease the maximum number of units on this property. It's come to staff's attention through the years that there are some drainage concerns associated with this property, and the applicant's engineer has been on a mission to study the drainage conditions and has also communicated with our city engineering staff to discuss how to best address those drainage concerns. As you well know, the design of the drainage system will be reviewed if this property is rezoned and when they make an application to the Planning Commission for a preliminary plat and a final plat. So the technical review of any drainage plans will come at a later date, and it's not something that we would review at this time. But we did want to put you on notice that the applicant's aware of drainage concerns and that we'll be expecting them to come up with a plan that will manage the system and improve the system. If you have any questions regarding this application, myself or Mr. Aylott will be glad to answer them. Otherwise, you should conduct a public hearing prior to making your recommendation regarding the zoning change request for this property located along Manchester Pike.
Any questions of Ms. Green or Mr. Aylott? Mr. Taylor, do you have anything? Okay. If not, I'll open the public hearing. Ask anybody to come forward that would like to speak.
Hello, I'm again Alan Fair, 4224 Thoroughbred Lane, Murfreesboro. As far as the CH zoning, that's my question. With the amount of, and again, this might be the planning part in a different meeting. On record, I'd like to know what that might be used for. Police, fire, with the amount of people that are going to be coming into this area potentially. That would be one thing that I would like to know about. Absolutely, that we need to talk about. As far as far out as we are from the city and Joby Jackson, what and where would that be used for? Because my understanding is with that zoning, CH, you can use that for something like that. So
your question is, what can go into the commercial highway zone?
Infrastructure, fire, police, something to that effect to help protect that major expansion you're going to.
Okay. Mr. Aylott, do you have that?
Yes, sir, I do.
Okay. We'll address that after the public hearing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Just why don't you wait.
Good evening. My name's Ricky Marlin, 7868 Blankenship Road, and come tonight to represent the BCA, the Buckhannon Community Alliance. We're an organization that's formed about a year and a half ago to protect the Buckhannon community and our rural way of life and make sure we have a quality of life, stability out there. We have several concerns about this property and about the rezoning. And I can probably sum it up in 2 words. Don't know. We don't know what we don't know out there is what we're worried about. We would much rather see this come back as a PUD, Plan Unit Development, so that we know some of these concerns that Triple Crown has about cut-throughs, where the roads are going to be, the entrances, how many houses. We have an estimate. The water pressure, how much water pressure is out there now, how much will we have after this is built out. Of course, the sewer, it's going to be hooked up to the sewer, but the expansion of Manchester Highway, we're concerned about this development impacting that and on the long-range transportation plan, how that will be addressed. We're very concerned about this property. Of course, that's why we're up here tonight. But you combine this with the Jones Farm with, I don't know, over 2,000 houses, and what's going to be the plan to serve the future high school probably going to be out there. And I think the 2-lane is not sufficient, and we don't know any of those things by just rezoning this tonight, and we'd much rather it be deferred or delayed until those situations can be resolved so we know what we're getting into out there. And I understand, of course, it'll be in the city, and the children will have the option to go to the city schools, obviously through 6th grade, but how that will impact the cities. The city's going through a rezoning now with the school districts. How will that affect? I don't know how that's going to be addressed. And you may have these same questions, and I would think so. What's the other big concern besides what we don't know what we're getting into is the commercial out there on the very end, right there on the corner. The commercial next to a school zone, how is that going to work in? How is that going to affect the school? Has that been done before in the city and the county? And it's on a curve and on a hill where that commercial is. So we have concerns about turning lanes, sight vision for those type of things. Fire protection. I guess it would be served by 231 or Mercury. But Joe B. Jackson's not complete yet, so I guess it would have to be Mercury fire protection out there. So to sum it all up, we would much rather it come back as a PUD. We could see that's what the Jones Farm is. It was a PUD. And that way we can see exactly what we're getting into, how much, how many houses, how many people, how many houses a year even, those type of things. That's a much better plan. And even on the, that's what a PUD is for. It gives the residents out there some protection to know what we're getting into. And that's what we respectfully ask. And I know it's going to go through, if you go this route, it'll go through site plan development and all that, but there's no public hearing. We really don't know what we're getting into at that point. So once again, we represent about 180 to 100 families in the Buckhannon community, and that's our concerns right now. And we respectfully ask that we get a little more information and it comes back with as a PUD. Any questions for me? All right. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Anybody else? Seeing nobody come forward, I'm going to close the public hearing. Mr. Adelon.
Yes, sir. First of all, I want to talk about the commercial highway. We're looking at about 8.5 acres, which in terms of commercial areas, it's not very large. What we're looking at probably in my discussions with the developers are probably something along the order of opportunities for daycare centers, something like a small market, a restaurant. This property does not lend itself well in terms of location for what I call heavy commercial, like we see typical on Broad Street. It probably looks like something more like a site for a secondary commercial, but something like a Sir Pete's, a dollar store, a automotive repair like a Firestone. Those are the kind of things you might see in a place like this. The location of the commercial is right at the entrance to the location for the streets into the subdivision. So the developers are going to need to be very well conscious that that's their front door into their remaining tract of land. So I would expect that they're going to be very careful and very selective about what they do there. The commercial, it's really being held because it was one of those judgment calls as do you bring the residential houses in the subdivision all the way out to the street, the main highway, or do you create a buffer between the main highway and the residential development? And that's really where they ended up choosing. They looked at the subdivision called Berkshire. Berkshire is off Blackman Road. It has a similar dynamic with a residential in the back with a commercial area of about 8 acres, 10 acres in the front. And it seems to have worked. To date, Berkshire has not had the commercial develop, although it has been there for the better part of 10 years now. Another example where this has worked has been the Savannah Ridge subdivision. Savannah Ridge is on South Church Street, a very nice subdivision. It has it had a real estate office in the front, and it's got a Camino Real restaurant in the front, and it has a Subway restaurant in the front. All those seem to be compatible with the Savannah Ridge, and when I drive out there, I see something that looks harmonious. In fact, that commercial area is probably a better example of what we'll likely see on Manchester Highway. About the utilities, let's sort of analyze that for just a moment. We're looking at a development that's going to take many years to take place. We're not looking at something where there's going to be a very aggressive schedule to see this tract of land develop from start to finish. We will see probably a very slow absorption of lots in the very beginning. The subdivision will probably mature over the course of several years, and then probably be the better part of 10 to 15 years in development. I say that's exactly what's happening with Berkshire, and Berkshire is in the heart of Blackman. Blackman is one of the hottest real estate markets in Middle Tennessee. So we can judge from it that they're trying to, if they're trying to replicate Berkshire, it's going to be a while in seeing development take place. Part of what will happen on an annual basis, the city will budget. We will budget for police protection. We will budget for a garbage pickup. We will budget for fire protection. We will do all the things that we need to do, and we will analyze each year what we need for the following year. That's part of the way our city manager operates the city. We budget on an annual basis. As we identify trends, as we identify needs, we advise the city manager advises the council budgets and adopts the budget and determines the level of service it wants to provide. It will be our expectation to provide police service to the same level as the rest of the city immediately upon the effective date of annexation. After all, with the effective date of annexation, there's only 2 or 3 houses out there. As subdivisions develop, the police department will know about the plans. They will budget. They will look at what they need to do, and they'll make plans to provide services. Fire protection. We know that Joe B. Jackson has not been extended. When Joe B. Jackson is completed, which it is under construction, we'll see access to a second fire hall much closer than the other stations. It's on the outside of the 5-mile range that we prefer, but it's within the area that we can provide an ISO 2, which is a very good fire protection. The water pressure, I don't really know what it is. I don't know what it will be. But I can tell you that that's something that we take very seriously, because if they don't meet the fire protection levels that Mr. Marlin, I'm talking about the fire protection now, if you want to kind of pick your ears up, the fire protection will be expected to meet the requirements for an ISO 2 rating. If they don't, they'll have to put in some kind of booster pump. CUD will be monitoring this very closely. They typically review the same plans we do. If they need to add additional water storage, they'll probably look to do that. They're in a growing county. I expect they're watching very closely what's going on. They do pay a lot of attention to the developments that we review. In short, I think that we will have the services, and it will not be a detriment to the existing residences in the area.
You have questions, Jim?
Mr. Taylor, what's your estimated completion of this project?
It will all be market driven, but the developments we're seeing right now, 40 homes a year right now the good ones are ticking along at 40 homes a year. So if you're using the 700 to 800, you're looking at 20 or 25 years. And that could, we just went through something where we built 5 homes a year, so for the past 5 years, so that could drag it out.
So this is
it's a long-term project, yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor.
Mr. Taylor, while you're up there, this is not site plan review, but the gentleman did ask about, it's a 2-lane road. Do you foresee what improvements, or are you even in a position to talk about the improvements, knowing that it's a state highway? There's not something we could do, but what you foresee happening with respects to this particular subdivision?
Hang on a second. Let me address that first, and then let him follow up.
Okay.
The major thoroughfare plan does call for it to be improved. It's on a major thoroughfare plan as one of our spoke arteries. Ultimately, I'm expecting that it will need to be addressed, I think, to a 5-lane facility. That's long term. So as they develop the property, we will, at the very minimum, we're going to expect that they do right-of-way dedication in accordance with the major thoroughfare plan, whatever it is. The major thoroughfare plan that we will be adopting or looking to develop over the next 2 years may call for something more. And when they get ready to submit subdivision plans, it will be what's required. It will be my expectation that we'll need to see some left turn improvements into the site because there will be a very heavy evening peak for people who will be turning, very similar to Savannah Ridge. So we will be seeing initially a need for some left turn improvements. Initially, there will not be a need for traffic signalization. However, as we get into later stages, we may need to see that done. So we're going to lay the groundwork for ultimate signalization to the extent that the state will allow us to when we review the plans. So we'll be balancing what are the needs for this section, but what are the long-term needs. We aren't going to expect them to do something that's unwarranted or uncalled for, but we will expect them to lay the groundwork for their ultimate demand. And that will, it may be that with the first phase we don't require the left turn, but with the second phase, say we get to 70 lots, we'll probably need to see those left turn lanes. And that's basically the standard the state has for left turn lanes, 70 lots.
And when would we be reviewing that major thoroughfare plan? I mean, I'm assuming there's one already in place, but with respects to the developments that this one and the Jones property, the changes that may need to be made with respects to that major thoroughfare plan? We're
going to be looking at a major thoroughfare plan along with the comprehensive plan that I hope to brief you guys on the 20th of this month.
Okay.
The expectation right now will be that it's going to be about 18 months to 2 years from start to finish on developing the plan. We want to have a very careful and very deliberate community engagement process. And when you engage the public, you don't do it in a hurry. You've got to give people a chance to participate. You've got to have people a chance to talk about it and then to be engaged. So that's our current thinking. I will be hopefully making a report on more specifics in about 2 weeks on that subject.
Thank you, Mr. Alott.
Mr. Gilley.
Thank you, Chairman. First I'd like to say that I think just a general glance at it, Matt, that the breakdown of the potential zonings that you have it looks like a pretty good breakdown. Almost 2/3 of it fall into the largest size lots that for single-family residential that we have in the city, and I think that's a good thing. The other side of it, though, is I know that Mr. Marlin and his neighbors have a big vested interest in that community and have had for generations back. There'll be another public hearing if we pass this tonight at the city council level. Yes. And if we pass this tonight, what I would like to ask you to do is sit down with Mr. Marlin and the folks with his organization and see if you can help them with some of the questions that they've got to try to alleviate some of those unknowns. I know that we've gone through the process in the last couple of years that plan developments have not always turned out the way that we wanted them to, and as we've come back and forth to bulk zoning. We've also had some that have come to us with some restrictive covenants that have been voluntarily put in place that have alleviated some of the concerns of the folks in the area. But this is a big unknown for them. So if you would get with him after this and
Absolutely.
And work with them on that, I would appreciate that.
Absolutely. And I can say that Ms. Taylor, it's no relation to me, although I do like the name. This is an old family farm. She wants to develop it in a manner that would make her family as well as her father proud. So, just that in itself, it's going to be something of a matter of pride for her, I believe. I think that she'll be happy to talk with the neighbors. I think she's lived out there for quite some time. She wants to remain good neighbors, so we'll absolutely do that.
If you could do that and report back to
yes, sir.
At least the council when it comes up before us at that level.
Any other questions from Mr. Taylor? Thank you, Mr. Taylor.
Thank you.
Appreciate you coming up. Any other questions for Mr. Alott or Mrs. Green? If there's no other questions, we're ready for a motion.
Move for approval.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Move on to the next item. That's an annexation petition for approximately 67.12 acres along the Salem Highway east of Veterans Parkway. Mr. Bill Rowland on behalf of the Rucker Donnell Foundation and Mr. Steve Turner are the applicants. Ms. Green.
Thank you. Our next public hearing is to consider an annexation request for approximately 67.12 acres located along Salem Highway, east of Veterans Parkway. The property is identified as the pink color on the map before you with the hatch pattern through it, and the label calls it petition area. That's because the property owners have submitted a petition to annex this property. Mr. Bill Rowland is representing the Rucker Donnell Foundation and Mr. Steve Turney, who are the applicants. The subject property is located along both sides of Salem Highway, north and south of Salem Highway. It's located to the east of Veterans Parkway. The applicants have petitioned the city to annex their property. The subject property is located within Murfreesboro's urban growth boundary. The urban growth boundary has been identified in this map as the yellow hatched area. The property is also contiguous with current city limits, and you can see current city limits as the chartreuse or very bright green color with the green outline. You can see that's contiguous with current city limits on the eastern property line, and to the south there are two parcels that's contiguous with. The property is independently contiguous with the city limits, so that no additional properties need to be annexed to effect the annexation of these parcels. The property is primarily undeveloped, and the owners have indicated that they intend to pursue development of their property. As a matter of fact, the next agenda item is to consider a zoning change request simultaneous with the annexation. The annexation of this property does include right-of-way. It includes approximately 8,012 linear feet of New Salem Highway. Also includes approximately 2,148 linear feet of Veterans Parkway right-of-way. Included with your agenda materials is an annexation feasibility study and a plan of services that outlines the city services that are available to the property and a time frame as to when the city will be able to provide those services. It appears that the annexation will be relatively easy to effect. It is important to note, though, that the applicant will be required to install fire hydrants to protect the property, since the existing structures are set back quite a distance from the street. Last month, the Planning Commission considered and recommended for approval annexation of land west of Veterans Parkway, and that property is identified on the map, and I'll go ahead and bring that back up on the screen, as the area shaded blue and with a hatched area. So a portion of this, so you can see from the map the urban growth boundary, which all the properties are included in, the current city limits in the chartreuse color, the area in process of annexation is the area shaded blue in the hatch pattern. This area that you're considering annexing, which is the 67.12 acres in the hot pink color, to the north is an area shaded orange, which includes properties for which the city passed an ordinance to annex. However, that's been held up in litigation, so we, I think, casually refer to that as the litigation area, and so the label points to that and says area in litigation. So last month, the Planning Commission did consider annexing this area shaded blue, which is labeled area in process of annexation. A portion of the subject property is a part of the same tracts as those already recommended for approval. These parcels were not included with the petition that you considered last month due to a misunderstanding. Staff now has a better or clearer idea of the matter and is ready to move forward with the request of the property owners to annex the area shaded purple. The Planning Commission should discuss this petition after conducting a public hearing. If you have any questions, either myself or Mr. Alott will be glad to answer them. Also, Mr. Brick Murphy and Mr. Matt Taylor represent the applicants, and they're in the audience this evening. They do not have a presentation prepared, but they are prepared to answer any questions that you may have, and they can be of assistance. You should conduct a public hearing prior to making your recommendation, and we're available for any questions that you have.
Okay. Any questions for staff? If not, I'll open the public hearing, ask anybody to come forward that'd like to speak. Anybody at all? Seeing no one come forward, I'll close the public hearing.
Move for approval. Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Final public hearing tonight is a zoning application for 63.22 acres along Salem Highway, east of Veterans Parkway, to be zoned commercial highway simultaneous with annexation. Mr. Bill Rowland, on behalf of the Rucker Donnell Foundation, and Mr. Steve Turney are the applicants. Ms. Green.
Thank you, sir. Our next public hearing and final public hearing is to consider a zoning change simultaneous with annexation. It's for the property for which you just considered an annexation petition, which is approximately 63.22 acres located along Salem Highway east of Veterans Parkway. The request is being made by the Rucker Donnell Foundation and Mr. Attorney, who is being represented by Mr. Bill Rowland, and it is to zone the property CH, or Commercial Highway District, simultaneous with their annexation. The applicants have requested the property be zoned CH, and CH zoning district is a zoning district that we see along state highways, and of course this is located along Salem Highway, or Highway 99. I do have an illustration from the Salem Pike land use study, which is a little difficult to read, I think, on the screen, but it does clearly depict a commercial node for the subject property. So the CH zoning for the property is generally consistent with the Salem Pike land use plan. Planning Commission should conduct a public hearing before making your recommendation to City Council regarding the zoning change to CH simultaneous with this property. Again, Mr. Brick Murphy and Mr. Matt Taylor are here to answer any questions you have. However, they do not have a presentation prepared. I and Mr. Alott are also available for questions you may have.
Any questions? Okay, I'll open the public hearing at this time and ask anybody to come forward that would like to speak. Nobody? Seeing no one come forward, I'm going to close the public hearing.
Ms. Ely? Excuse me, Ms. Brown?
Birthday girl's time.
Long time habit, I apologize. This is considered a commercial node on our land use study?
Yes, sir, it is.
And that was identified over 15 years ago, 12 years ago?
It's 13, I think.
And it's on the crossing of Veterans Parkway and Salem Pike?
Yes, sir.
Two major
arterials.
Two major arterials. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
If there are none, I'll make a motion that we approve, subject to any staff comments.
I'll second that motion.
Motion made and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed. Motion carries. That concludes the public hearing portion of our agenda this evening. The next portion is staff reports and other business. Mr. Adelot.
Yes, sir. I have two staff reports. Actually, one is from me and one is from Mr. Ives. And mine is not as much a staff report as it is to verify the Planning Commission's intentions. I have an illustration I'd like to hand out for you, just if you just take one and pass it. Tomorrow night, the City Council is scheduled to conduct a public hearing on a PUD amendment for a development called Sheffield Place, formerly known as Murphy Station. The property is on the Veterans Parkway near Kimbrough Road, or what formerly was Kimbrough Road, now called St. Andrews Drive. One of the entrances into it, they're looking at just a slight adjustment and changing around the entrance so that the entrance on the east, that'd be the one on the right, becomes the main entrance, as opposed to what the plan currently calls for to be the one on the left, the one to the west. I just wanted to confirm that had this been before you at the public hearing, you would have found this acceptable. I found it to be essentially equivalent. It doesn't change the density. It's just a change in just how the streets are going to lay just slightly. And I would appreciate if you all would verify that had this been before you, instead of the entrances being the other way around, same entrances, it's just that one of them becomes, they just swap the primary entrances around.
Mr. Adelot, does this affect the minimum lot size as identified in the program book?
Not one bit.
Okay.
And it'll be under HOA administration?
Yes, it will be.
Okay. I see no problem with Mr. Adelot.
Want a motion? Is that
Just yes, it would confirm that it would be, had this been before you would have approved it instead of the one.
We'll ask for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve this. Second.
Motion's made and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed. Motion carries. Mr. Adelot.
Mr. Ives.
Mr. Ives.
I have partly for your information and partly will be asking your approval of a matter. I guess the way to clear a room is to let people know that I'm going to say something. It certainly worked tonight.
Do I hear a motion we adjourn? Just kidding, Mr. Rice.
I so moved.
Yeah.
This is the best illustration I have of the whole matter here. This concerns Greenway Extension 4. The extension of Greenway 4, which will take it from its current ending point, which is adjacent to Barfield Road, about a mile to south of Salem Pike. It'll take it from that point on down to Barfield Crescent Park. This has been probably back in the 90s when the 4 phases of expansion were planned. This is the last one, and we're about to get started. Thank you. The beginning part will be here, which is, again, this is just a little ways below the Highway 99 and just below the confluence of the East Fork, the Middle Fork and the West Fork. What we're going to be splitting Phase 4 into 2 subphases. We'll do a 4A and a 4B. 4A, thank you. You've got it on? Yes, you do. 4A consists of from the point where the trail now ends down to an old abandoned bridge that will take us across the river into the Southridge subdivision. And at that point, there will be a small trailhead with a parking lot. The second part of 4A will start at Barfield Park, will come up to now Veterans Parkway, come across along Veterans Parkway, and then curve down to the old Barfield Crescent Road where that bridge still exists but has been abandoned. And if you drive by there, you'll see it's covered with grass at this point. We'll go off then and go underneath the bridge for New Veterans Parkway and connect to both sidewalks on both sides of Veterans Parkway. That will be 4A. 4B, which we hope to start at about the time 4A is complete, will connect those two. What I would ask your approval of is a planned reroute of a part of Phase 4B. Back in the spring, Council directed us to take a hard look at some options, alternatives, and avoid taking a property that would be a whole take, including a person's house. We did that, studied it with Lowson Associates, went back and looked at available options, and are ready to report back now a recommendation. Park and Rec Commission did approve this today, and we expect to take this to Council tomorrow night. We wanted you to see it, and also because it is a bit of a change in land acquisition that we ask for you to approve this as a Planning Commission. The change is this, and it's difficult to see, but if the current route would take us, we start out on the west side of the river to the old bridge there at Southridge subdivision. Then we cross to the east side of the river, and we would stay on the east side of the river down to a driveway that a private driveway we would which constitutes a bridge over the river. We would rebuild that bridge, then follow along the west side of the river all the way down to under Veterans Parkway. What we're proposing to do now is stay on the east side of the river longer than we had originally planned. So rather than rebuild the bridge that's a private driveway, we would stay on the east side of the river down to a point that's essentially behind the new county fire station that's on Barfield Road. Then we would build a new bridge to cross over and then follow the west side of the river on down to Veterans Parkway. We eliminate the need for a whole take, which includes the take of a person's house, but by doing so, we will take more land from 2 other landowners on the east side of the road. Although it is more land from them, the land that we'll be taking is floodway land, floodplain land at least, and it's very far distant from their house. It will not impact their residents the same way that the trail on the west side of the road would do. So we're not completely eliminating the take of that property because we will still take an easement across the very end of it for the bridge. but we will substantially reduce the take on one property, but increase a bit the property we'll be taking from two others. So because of that change, we want to bring that to the Planning Commission and ask for your approval. Be happy to answer any questions. What I had passed out to you, I believe the yellow line would show the original plan where we cross the bridge at the driveway and then continue on to the south. I believe it's red is the proposed new route where we would stay on the east side of the river further to the south.
Okay.
With all of that, I'll be happy to try to answer any questions.
Mr. Young and Mr. Gilly will be seeing this again tomorrow night, so they may have some preemptive questions.
The property owners and the new route, are they aware of this, and they basically signed off on this?
They are aware of it, yes. There have been discussions. I've not personally been involved with those discussions, but Mr. Lyons and our consultants at Lowe's Associates and Mr. Goodwin, Lenny Goodwin of Park and Rec, have talked with them. I can't say that they're 100% enthused about it, but I don't believe that there's going to be any substantial opposition from them. And again, it's a substantially smaller impact on their property than it would be on the property owner on the west side of the river.
Mr. Gilly?
Well, the council as a whole several months ago asked staff to go back and try to make this work, given the circumstances that had come to all of our attention, and trying to work that out. And I know you all have worked very hard for that. And I believe, from my understanding from Mr. Lyons, the additional cost to it is going to still be able to be taken care of through the federal monies that we've had awarded to us for the completion of this.
Yes, it will cost more, and primarily the cost is the fact that we will be building a new bridge as opposed to replacing a bridge. And because of the topography, the new bridge is going to have to be higher and substantially longer than the other bridge would have been. We have a reduced property acquisition cost, but we have a substantially increased construction cost. The net will come to, our estimates are just over $500,000 additional cost. We do believe that there's sufficient funding available so that this will be an 80-20 cost, just as the rest of the trail is, and as all of our trails have been.
Any other questions or comments, Mr. Halliburton?
The only question I have is, I'm assuming this is not a public hearing process, or there was a public hearing at Parks and Rec, or that's not something we do.
We have had a number of public hearings in the course of planning the trail project,
right?
And a number of public meetings outside of the public hearing processes. This change, we do not believe, requires a public hearing.
Okay, and that was my specific question. So
correct, right.
Well, was the recommendation of the Parks and Rec to do this?
Yes.
And again, not to speak on behalf of the rest of the council, but it was a pretty clear directive to try to find a way to define this alternate route at the council level to try to make this work for the family that did not want to be moved out of their home.
That's correct.
Okay. Any other questions? You want a motion, I presume?
I would, yes. I'd like a motion to approve this recommendation.
Okay. I'll call for a motion.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Mr. Adlott, anything else?
No, sir.
There's no further business. We stand adjourned.